Alexander, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you here because your story is amazing. But before we really dive deep into what you're doing now, you started your career in the newsroom as a journalist, and
That's correct.
now you're a space founder. There's a lot in between, right? From the newspaper to building a space company. So, why journalism? And can you talk about your story?
Sure, of course. And yeah, you're right. It's been quite a journey, I would say. And if you would have asked me like a couple of years ago where I want to go, I would have not anticipated that I would found a space company. So that's why sometimes I'm still waking up and being a bit surprised where I actually landed. But yeah, you're right. I started as a journalist. I've been working at the German news magazine Der Spiegel for 10 years. And actually covering quite a lot of stories. So most of them were science related, but also crime related. And then in the last couple of years, it involved more and more actually Earth observation and satellite imagery, which I then used for my reporting about crisis, about wars actually, and climate change. And that's how I initially got in touch with satellite imagery. And also in the last couple of years, it was quite astonishing, surprising for me because I realized how big the impact of commercial satellite images actually are. Because before that, it was kind of, I wouldn't say science fiction, but something out of spy movies that only governmental entities can control satellites and steer them where they want to look and then use the data for their analytics. And when the war in Ukraine started, but already before, actually, you could see how big this commercial impact is, and that it is not only governmental entities, but real commercial companies that are actually making some value out of this data. And that was super interesting for me. And that's how I got in touch with satellite imagery, I would say, and Earth observation. But that's not completely how the company started.
Exactly, exactly. So, before we jump into Marvel, why journalism in the first place?
Um, I don't know. It's maybe it's just how my life works. I kind of walked into this also as well. So actually, in the beginning, I wanted to become a camera operator. That was something that I really wanted to do, and I did some internships in Germany. And then at some point, I realized, okay, operating the camera itself is not fulfilling me completely. So that's why I did this video journalism part, and I got in touch with journalism, and then it got more and more about journalism itself and also data journalism. And that's how I got into this. Then I did motion design, science, animations, and stuff. And yeah, that's how I kind of found my way into journalism. And then it got more and more exciting. I got to travel the world. I got to cover many, many different topics, from deep sea research, where I dove into the ocean, on the ground of the
Wow.
ocean, 2,000 meters depth, for 9 hours, and did like a video report with all kinds of cameras and 3D animations for this, but then also covering stories, for instance, in Nigeria about human trafficking or drug abuse, and also actually hunting down neo-Nazi networks in the US. So it was pretty broad, I would say. But then in the end, more and more, it was aiming at war reporting and using Earth observation data for covering the war in Ukraine. And then I even went to Ukraine a couple of years ago in the winter to also cover the war there. So it was pretty broad what I was doing in the end, and always very exciting.
Okay, now that you mentioned the war in Ukraine, which is unfortunately still going on and still something present in Europe, that's where the idea of Marvel comes about, right? How did that? Well, how was it first of all? How was it to be there, like reporting in Ukraine about reporting about the war, and then how did you then move to Marvel?
So first of all, I went to Ukraine, but I didn't go to the front line because there were some people at Spiegel that were doing war reporting solely. So they actually went there and covered it, like really being there in the trenches. And I went to Ukraine. I was covering stories about demining operations, for instance, around Kiev. And I went to the minefields and was kind of disseminating how everything works there, how long it actually takes to also demine the country, because it's one of the countries in the world with the most heavily mined countries. So it's going to
Wow.
be a big problem also in the future for the people living there. And that was one part of the reporting. Other parts were also covering the attacks on the infrastructure that were at this time also taking place mostly in winter to also demolish the morale of the people and everything. So this was another part that we were also covering there. And it was, of course, it's intense being there because I was in Kiev and around only, but you could still feel inside the city that there's some heaviness lying over everything. You have some kind of daily lives that are going on. You have restaurants, you have even bars where people are going, but still everything is kind of gray and people are, they're super resilient. It's super tough and I cannot even start to imagine how it feels to really live there. But yeah, it was, of course, for me, very impressive how resilient the Ukrainians are and how they still are actually fighting what's happening there.
It's unfortunate because war, I mean, to me, is never a solution to anything because
Right.
it's just a way of destroying people's lives and making people suffer unnecessarily, in my view, right?
Yes.
But moving on, you spent time in Ukraine, and what did you see there? That were you using Earth observation data in all your work? And yeah, what did you see there that then sort of
Yep.
shift your focus to space in a way?
Exactly. So one of the biggest points was that there was so much data coming from the United States showing what's going on in Ukraine, and especially not only in Ukraine but also everywhere else where you have crises and disasters that are happening. Sometimes it's very hard to get to those certain areas because there's fighting, because the whole infrastructure is broken down, etc. So it showed, or it gave us the opportunity to report with verifiable data coming from the satellites, what's actually going on in certain areas that are hard to reach. And at the same time, there was this huge amount of open source intelligence also coming in through social media, where people were posting videos and photos of certain areas and events that then would be geolocated by an incredible crowd in the internet that was doing this geolocation. And then if you put this together, geolocated social media information of something happening and Earth observation data, satellite imagery, you would have a really good picture of what's actually going on the ground without being on the ground. And that was extremely fascinating for me and kind of an eye-opening moment, what's possible with commercial Earth observation data. At the same time, and that's why we also kind of founded Marble Imaging, or there was a reason for me to found Marble Imaging together with the others, was that we saw that most of this data is coming from the United States. And at least twice during the war in Ukraine, the information flow has been turned off for allies or for Ukraine themselves because of geopolitical tensions, I would say. And this showed me that we are heavily relying on an ally, the United States, on their data. And this is something where I thought we would have to change it. And that's something, at least for my part, why I was very happy to found Marble Imaging together with Rob, with Raul and Gopika. And those three, they also talked quite intensively for quite a while on Earth observation. They've always been exchanging on this topic. But for me, it was mostly those events in combination with the potential of Earth observation, why I was thrilled to start this and to actually then quit my job and start Marble Imaging.
Wow. But like, one thing is realizing of a problem, seeing that there's a problem and that could be solved. As you said, like all Earth observation data is coming from the US, and geopolitical tensions might and can cut that data flow. But a whole different step is to actually quit your job and build a company. I mean, I'm sure it wasn't as easy as you share it, or was it as easy as you said? How did you meet your co-founders?
Never.
Like, there's a lot of information there to share.
Yeah, that's true. And maybe I have to go one step back because this is explaining then better why I was pulled into this also. Because basically the whole mastermind, and I have to give him credit for this, is Rob when it comes to pulling the strings. So Rob is our CEO and actually a good friend of mine. So I know him since we were teenagers. He grew up in a similar village near Frankfurt where I also grew up. And he went into aerospace, I went into journalism, and we had vacations together and met all the time. But like from a job point of view, our paths never crossed until that point. And Rob, he used to work at OHB, so a big company also building satellites here in Bremen. So he is from the industry, and he knows Gopika and Raul, who are really good when it comes to actually processing Earth observation data, making some sense out of it, creating analytics. And so they've been exchanging, Rob and I have been exchanging. And then when this happened in Ukraine and Rob and I were more and more exchanging, he also was the one saying, okay, let's get this done. Let's start this and let's try to see if there is even a German or European company doing this. And if not, maybe we can do this. And so we slowly started setting this up. It wasn't like initially that we all quit our jobs and then we jumped into this. But then at a certain point, we actually won the European Space Agency's business incubator. And this was kind of an initial moment for us to say, okay, apparently this is a good start. We can go through with it. And then we gained more and more traction to the degree that we saw, okay, this is not feasible to do this as a side job.
Yeah.
We all have to go full in there. The time is right. We have an idea. People are kind of resonating to this idea. Let's try to do this. And then at some point, we got lucky. We were at the same, like I said, the perfect time and spot when we won the small satellite payload competition, where we submitted a proposal with the German Space Agency, and we won this. And that basically meant that there was a big grant that we got. It was more than 5 million euros to basically procure a platform, to get the launch procured, and to basically have a big piece of the first satellite already in place. And that meant, okay, now we have to go all in. We all quit our jobs and said, okay, let's go for it. That's what Europe needs. That's what Germany needs. And let's be bold.
Amazing. And that satellite your first satellite it's expected to launch late this year, right?
Exactly, that's the plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So now moving into Marble Imaging itself, if you had to explain what the company does to one of your former colleagues, how would you do it?
Yeah, it's not always easy, but I would say what Marble Imaging is doing is we are developing a constellation of very high resolution Earth observation satellites. And we will use those satellites to sell the data, the images coming from them, and also develop analytics that are very important for security related issues, but also climate change monitoring. That would be probably my summary of what we're doing.
Awesome.
And complex for some.
Indeed, because you're doing two things. One is sending the satellites and taking the pictures, and also analyzing them. Is that something that the current existing companies or existing players do?
Yes. So one thing that is very important to differentiate is that we will be the ones owning the satellites and operating them, but we are not building any hardware by ourselves. So we are specifying what we actually need in the end, but our partners are then building the payload, so the camera in the end, the platform and everything, integrating everything. We get it, we shoot the satellites up in space, and then we operate it, and we use the data. And here's the big difference towards other companies. So there are many, they're called value-added service providers. So basically companies using data from satellite providers, implementing them, and then producing their own analytics. But they're always dependent on those providers. And
Yep.
if for political reasons, for instance, some are saying, okay, we're not giving you any data anymore, then your whole pipeline is not working anymore and you're dry. And that's something that a couple of our competitors, and there are not so many in Europe or in the world, are doing pretty well by having their own infrastructure in space and using their own data for their own analytics. It's good for the business model because here you're pretty flexible. You can say, okay, I'm going to sell the data to resellers, for instance, or you're going to use it for your own algorithms. You're going to have really good training data and a lot of it for your AI supported analytics, which is also very, very important. And so you're really independent from what's happening around the world. And that is, if you look at the geopolitical situation right now, very important to be sovereign and to be independent from what's going on. And that's what we are feeling right now extremely, even more than when we started marble imaging. You can really feel that there's a big need of having a sovereign constellation for very high resolution Earth observation and data right now.
Okay, and why very well? I imagine very high resolution is because the more resolution, the better, right? But can you dive a bit more very quickly into the actual technology or what makes you unique in terms of the technology that you're using, apart from the analytics bit?
I would say it's a mix. So first of all, we know what's needed in the end, what the end user needs. So the whole operational concept that we want to implement with our satellites, that's very important that you know what kind of resolution you need, what kind of constellation you're actually building, which inclination you're using, what kind of operational concept you have in order to deliver the best data with the best quality for the best analytics in the end. So what we do is we have also, if you compare it to other satellites, it's pretty cheap what we procure and what we're building with a high quality, which is very important. If you look at competitors, sometimes the satellite costs 100 million or more. Our satellites, the first one is 10 millions, and then it decreases a lot, I would say. And this is also part of our constellation concept, to not only have like 2 or 3 or 4 satellites in space, but plenty. So 20 until the end of 2028, and then even more, because what we want to have is not only the very high resolution, as you mentioned, but also very high revisit rates, so that you don't have to wait for an image for, I don't know, a couple of weeks or maybe a month or even later, but to have it daily in the end, and maybe in the future then even in near real time, because this opens up completely new business models, and this is super useful for security related topics, but also for basically every kind of topics. And this is something that is really lacking. So if you want to have like a little wrap up of everything, we're going to do it in a cheap, very high quality way. What we're offering, we're going to have newest technology on board the satellites. We're going to have plenty of satellites, and that's a big advantage if you compare it to many others.
Do you think one of your advantages is the fact that you yourself sort of used that Earth observation data when you were a journalist? Like you have in mind what the end user wants and needs because you yourself have used it in the past.
Yeah, I mean, that's a bit what I meant earlier, that the whole operational concept also has to be thought through. And I'm only one puzzle piece of this. The good thing is that in our company, we have all those puzzle pieces. We have people that have been designing satellites at OHB and know exactly what's needed technically and what's feasible. Then we have people who know how to process the data into awesome products. And then we have me basically at the end of this whole pipeline, who has been using all this data without any scientific knowledge on how to process it, but who knows how to use it, what's needed, how easy it has to be, and what the ultimate outcome has to be. So yes, I would say the combination is also something that is very important if you're actually developing products, that you're always keeping or having the end user in mind. And it helps actually sometimes to be a bit, I would say, like I am not the most scientific person, because then you just look for the best and easiest way to actually work with an end product. And that's what many of the end users also want to do, because that's also something that we're targeting. We don't want to develop products only for the scientific community. The scientific community is very important and also one part of the customers, but we also want to reach out to new markets, to people and industries who have no idea yet how big the potential of Earth observation data and analytics actually is. And it takes a while to educate them, to see how you can integrate it. But eventually, it's huge. It's a huge opportunity. And if we look at this long term, it's even way bigger than the Earth observation market or the value-added services and data market as it is right now.
Okay, yeah, of course, I can imagine. Also, a few technical questions. How do you choose the number of satellites that you want to have? Is the limit the funding that you might get? Like, yeah, how do you choose the number 20
I
for
mean,
your constellation?
in the end, it's also about the operational concept that we are developing, what we want to have. We want to have those high visit rates, high revisit rates with a high resolution. And then we have people here in our team who can do all the calculations, who can see, okay, where do we have to put those satellites in orbit in order to get the best revisit rates at the highest resolution. And this is something where we came up with this 20 satellites that's actually feasible. It's if you have the right VC money and public funding, you can actually get there. It's not some unrealistic number like 1,000 satellites, which is not doable at this point, at least. But at the same time, it also intersects perfectly with what the end user again needs, and this is, if possible, daily or even more revisits with a very high resolution. Here, you can never do it all. It's always a trade-off, kind of, and that's why we are sticking our heads together, bringing on all the expertise to see what the best mix of everything is in order to then, I would say, offer our products to a very, very broad range of potential customers, because this is also very important for us. The market is theoretically huge. There are so many applications, from agriculture to maritime cases to disaster response to defense use cases. So in the end, you could cater to them all, but you have to focus and at the same time be broad when it comes to the quality of the data and the spectral bands, for instance, so that everyone is potentially interested in what you're doing. And this is, like you said, it's tricky sometimes, but I think with our concept and what we want to achieve, we kind of hitting the right nerve. At least that's the response from the market participants we're talking to.
And why did you choose to go for a rather expensive satellite instead of building initially, I would say, a CubeSat constellation, sort of like what Planet does, which is less quality, but you get a higher revisit rate and you get a faster access to space in a way, and then sort of increase the quality of the constellation from there? Is that a good thought process from someone that's not an Earth observation expert?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, okay, if you say a rather expensive one, I would argue, oh, it's not that expensive actually. If you
Of
look
course,
at
that's true. That's
the
true.
even more expensive systems, but you're right, of course, you could also work with CubeSats, but there are limitations, of course. And like I said, it's always a trade-off. You can build a CubeSat, but then you will never have a resolution that is that high, and you will also have other performance issues, I would say. So for us, also keeping in mind that security is very important in Europe right now. You need a fairly high resolution, for instance, and also a good image quality. And without diving too much into the technical bits, that just meant we cannot have too small satellites. We cannot build too big satellites because it takes too long. It's too expensive. And in order to have the right mix between everything, the small sets, and now it's around 150 kilograms per satellite. That's what we are working with right now. That's the best, I would say, trade-off of everything. And that's what we figured out works best.
And the reason to not build a satellite in-house is it speed to get to orbit as fast as possible?
Also, I mean, speed is the most important part for us because right now there's so much movement in the market, and but we already progressed so much that I don't think that anyone will beat us in Germany in launching a satellite with the performance that we want to have before us. So speed is always a very, very important part in order to show that we're capable of what we want to do, that we are there, and then to use the momentum to scale up quicker. And yes, you're right. If we would also set up our own production line, it would be very costly. It would be another part of the company that we would have to build up. And right now, there is no wish for us in doing so because there are also so many good suppliers we're working with on a European level. And you can also then use multiple suppliers and see that everything is aligned. And then you're way more flexible when it comes to building the satellites because they've been there for years. They've built up their own production capabilities. For us to also get there would take additional time. And we don't want that. In the end, at least at this point, Marvel doesn't want to build any substantial hardware. We just want to have a very, very good performing satellite. We want to put it in space and operate it. Everything that happens there is, or from this point, is what is the most important and interesting part for us. So in the end, we are not I wouldn't call us a satellite company. We're more of a data company or Earth observation company, because the products in the end, that's what we want to capitalize on. And that's the most important part. But we have to get there with our own infrastructure. And that's why this is the plan we're having right now.
And okay, before we move into the market and how people have welcomed marble imaging and the idea of it, can we talk about the first satellite that you're launching? So you approached a satellite manufacturer, defined the requirements, agreed on a satellite, and yeah, how was that process of coming up with what you want, to speaking with the supplier, to then having the satellite built relatively soon and eventually launching it? How's that work going?
So work is going well, I would say. No, but in the end, of course, it has been negotiations with different kinds of suppliers, and then picking the right one for the right satellite that we want to do. Then also having the right off-the-shelf components in order to assemble everything quickly. But this is, of course, not a. This is still a process that is very delicate and complicated, in a sense that, of course, in the end, it's a high technology product that is being produced there, and that's why there are many loops and many quality checks in order to do so. And yeah, you have to find the right suppliers. And until this point, or right now, we have them, and we're very happy with the ones we're working with. Those are all European companies. One is Reflex Aerospace, for instance, for the first satellite that we're working with. They're building the satellite bus, basically integrating everything. And the camera is also coming from a very good European supplier. And yeah, for the future satellites, of course, we are keeping it the same way, having a broad network of suppliers, choosing the best ones, and then jointly developing the best next performance satellites.
And what would be the goal or the main objective of the first satellite?
So in the end, the first one is, of course, it's a demonstrator in the end. And our plan is to show the world, okay, look at marble imaging, look what they were capable of doing. So bringing the satellite into space and then actually working with the data and getting good quality data, that is what we want to achieve with the first satellite. And then everything that happens after is really then fulfilling the requirements of our own constellation concepts, and bringing more and more satellites into space, and then having better revisit rates, and covering all the topics we want to do. But that's basically it. We want to show the world that we are there. But what people sometimes tend to forget, or actually don't know, is there's this part of building the hardware and shooting the satellite into space, or deploying it in space, which is a challenge on its own also, I want to say. But then you also have the whole legal regulations that you also have to comply with in the end, also in Germany. Because, I mean, in the end, like I said earlier, it used to be that only governmental entities are allowed to control those satellites and use the satellites. And of course, with great power comes great responsibility. It also means that right now, commercial companies will be able in the future to also use this potential of high resolution, very high resolution Earth observation data. And you have to comply with the regulations, like, for instance, in Germany, the Satellite Data Security Law, Satellitendatensicherheitsgesetz, a very German word, I would say. And this means that you need a long time to actually comply with all the regulations that you have from the German entities when it comes to security standards, the way you want to apply them to how the data is being transferred and delivered, also for the satellite itself. And you have to really work hard on this in order to get the license in Germany to actually operate the satellite and to distribute the data as well. So this is also something that a startup like ours has to work through, even though resources are limited, which is quite challenging, I gotta say.
That's something I didn't think of, because it's true that very high resolution Earth observation data can be very sensitive, because it's not that you're taking images of forests and you just see trees, but you can get
Also,
to see, of course not, but like it's like or general lands from the skies, but you get to see movements of troops, people, ships, and yeah, many goods. So Yeah, how is that? So regulation, I imagine you see it's necessary up to a point, but do you think it's slowing you down, or how? And how does it feel you that you're building a European Earth observation company? How does it feel compared to what the US and other countries are doing on this regard of regulation?
Yeah. I mean, you're right, of course. I mean, in the end, it feels like it's slowing you down because it's, again, regulations that you have to comply with. I completely understand that it is sensitive data to a certain degree, and that's why there have to be some kind of security measurements in place. But of course, if you compare it to the United States, Europe always seems a bit over-regulated when it comes to this. Also, if you look at other laws that are also being developed in Germany. Then and in Europe, you have the national space law, for instance,
Mhm.
and other laws that are being put in place. For us, it's always important to find the right mix so that you have this regulation, but at the same time, you should not slow down companies that want to commercially use this data, for instance. And this is something that we are always negotiating on many different levels to maybe be not too strict like you could be, because otherwise the competitors will have an advantage, and then it will be easier for them to sell the data and to use the data. And of course, if we now have to comply with everything, and as you said, it's sensitive data, we have to come up with an idea of doing those automatical sensitivity checks, and then also find a way of still being quick to deliver the data. And we have all of this in the working, I would say, and we will come up with solutions, but it's binding additional resources. And then of course here it would be great to again not overregulate, but also assist startups and companies like us that are basically building a path here also for the whole industry in Germany and in Europe, to assist them and to help them in order to get there quickly and without or with as little regulation as possible. That would be great. But yeah,
Exactly.
additional
And do
work.
you? I no, I can imagine. And ideally, you wouldn't want to shift your focus from your core business, which is building that satellite, building that platform, and selling and analyzing that Earth observation data. But are you working with other companies in Europe to sort of make that push on that regulation and define those standards and find that way across the European and German law? Or are you doing this work by yourself?
No, I mean, mostly, I mean, there are always exchanges on a higher level, also on a higher political level, also with other companies from the new space industry to exactly highlight always this, how you can make the industry a bit, or how you can make it easier for the industry to access this market, how you can work with the regulations. So those talks together with other companies are also taking place. For some of this, like this very explicit law that I was talking about when it comes to
Mhm.
the data security from satellites, the thing is, there aren't so many in Germany. This is a very
Okay.
specific law that is tailored towards Germany, and we will be the only commercial company that will launch a very high resolution satellite by the end of the next year. That's our plan. And so we are basically the ones in exchange with the governmental entities in order to get there. And it's yeah, challenging because sometimes the answers are also a bit cryptic because this is new. This is new that this is happening, and that's why it's again challenging. But once you are there, and that's also an advantage, I would say, you are there, and then you complied with everything, and then it's also going to be a bit harder for the other ones to follow up on this. But of course, it would be great if the whole European ecosystem, new space ecosystem, would accelerate and would grow and flourish. That would be amazing because that's just what we need in Europe right now.
Indeed, I can imagine, and you must be seeing it firsthand. But do you think there's a real risk of regulation killing, not Marble Imaging, but killing space companies in Europe like now? Do you think it's something that happens, or is just a topic that people say because they are dedicating, of course, a lot of time to working with regulators and all this?
I would not know, to be quite honest, or I wouldn't go that far that it's actually killing. It can be very challenging for certain companies, and then of course it's tough and hard. But at the same time, I also see that there's a big push from the government also to support the new space developments and companies there. I mean, if you look at the market itself, also from the German DoD, for instance, 35 billion that are being put into the space and space defense market in the next couple of years. There's huge amount of money and support also coming in, also in order to foster the ecosystem in Europe and in Germany in particular. So I would say that also there it doesn't make sense to actively want to push back the whole development that is happening in the industry. It wouldn't make sense for the governments because they are also in need of a strong, now I'm sticking to Germany again, a strong German ecosystem, new space ecosystem of commercial companies that are willing and daring enough to put also their money on the table to be quick to bring the infrastructure into space, because we also realize this when talking to those governmental customers, that they are very, very interested in those solutions. But for them to develop them in-house in the traditional ways, it takes forever. And for a company like ours, it can be super quick in comparison, but it also means for us personally that we're taking a higher risk because we're putting our own money on the table in order to get there quickly. And that's where we would need the support. And like I said earlier, there are also governmental programs like the small satellite payload competition that were actually at the right time, at the right place for us, and that were accelerating our growth also. So I wouldn't always be so negative because there's like always, it's
It's the
two
topic.
parts, and it's gray. The area is gray in the end. It's not black and white, and that's why I just hope that there is a big push in further supporting the ecosystem and in not over regulating at the same time, because that's what happens if there's a big market movement. Then sometimes on the political side, there's this feeling of, oh, there's so much happening now. We have to be careful and just regulate. And that's definitely not the right thing to do if you want to be quick and support Europe quickly.
Definitely. And in a field such as critical Earth observation information, I think it's even more relevant because, there's a lot that's at stake
Correct.
because of through that data, right? So now let's talk about a bit about the market. What are the main challenges of this market? You coming as a journalist from outside the industry, you know, how has it been to enter into the Earth observation market, and what have you found out?
Yeah, so it's I would say it's a complex market. That's for sure. At the same time, it has huge potential, but you also have to be aware of where to start to actually make some money and where to get first. So as we have this vertical integration, I would say in the future, just if you talk about business in general, we will have two kind of businesses in the end. It will be selling the data from our satellites and then selling analytics that basically come from data that you analyze. And there is already a market of value added service providers out there. Many, many companies, thousands that are using Copernicus data, for instance, or commercial data, and they're producing their own analytics. If we have our own satellites in space, this is the easiest way to actually make some money because we're already talking to many, many resellers, to many, many value-added service providers, and they are saying, okay, there's a lack of this high-quality data right now in the market, and if you can provide us with this data, we will buy it. So this is the easiest part, I would say, from in the market once the infrastructure is in place, and this is actually fun. The other part is way more complex because if you are developing your analytics by yourself, what we are doing right now, of course, it takes a while, and then it's a bit hard to compete with all the other companies that are already out there selling their own analytics. So right now we already have customers, but it will be challenging to get more and more and more unless or until we have our own full-born products, which will happen also this year, and our own portal where you can then use those products. Then everything will be good. It will be amazing if the whole picture comes together when we have our own satellites, our own data, our own training data that we then implement into our own models and our analytics, because then we will have a big advantage in comparison to all those other service providers that have to buy costly data in order to train their algorithms, for instance. And this will be a huge advantage in the end. And then we have the last part, which is even more challenging, talking to those people who have no idea what Earth observation can actually do for them, but they have big pockets, and we see so many cool use cases in the end. But then again, in order to get there, to sell them a product, it takes long actually. And this will take a while, but this also has the biggest potential. And many of those use cases only kind of show up once you have the right infrastructure in place. If you have the timeliness of data, if you have high revisit rates, and if you get every day a picture of, I don't know, your construction site and very high resolution, and it's a large construction site, for instance, you can use this and also analyze how you're progressing, for instance, with this construction site. If you get this only every half a year, it's not that attractive for you as a company in the end. And this is with many, many, many different verticals. So I think that a lot will open up once our infrastructure is in place, and maybe in a couple of years it will be huge.
So it's funny, the first bit, which is talking to customers and like all the resellers, all the companies, and yeah, all the entities that want data to then sell it. That's the easy bit, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I would say, yeah, at least
that
easier. At least,
exactly.
yeah. From the pipeline view, I would say, in the end, you still have to deliver a very good product, and it also means it's not like I'm taking a picture here out of my office and then I'm selling this picture to someone. Everyone could do this. You also have to really build a very, very good, well-functioning satellite, bring it into space. This is the very hard part.
Of course.
And then also making some sense out of the data, processing it into something that's useful. And then you have this image in the end, which you want to sell. And to get there is very hard. Otherwise, everyone would do it.
Of
Yeah, to
course.
get there
And
is hard. But then in the end, if you have this in place, if you have the pipeline in place, it's theoretically, I would say, the easiest of the whole business is to just sell the data to other companies who then make some sense out of it. But we don't want to only do this. We want to do it all, like I explained.
exactly. And out of curiosity, is it easier to speak with other companies or with the government on this area of Earth observation?
Here it also really depends on what kind of governmental entity you're talking to. Some of them, they already use satellite data, and so that's always the good part, because then you don't have to start from scratch. And then others, they have no clue. But this can be basically both. This can be the private market or the governmental market. It really depends on the end user, and you have everything everywhere, I would say.
Okay, but is it such that companies are a lot more open and understand the technology and the markets much better than some governments, or like have you seen that difference?
Not really, I would
Okay,
say. The big difference is actually the sales cycle. So it means
yeah,
if you work with the government, then you have those tendering processes. It
yeah,
takes very long until there's actually a contract out there, and that's if you're working with just a commercial company, it can be way quicker to just get everything started and to do a proof of concept, a paid one, and then build on that. But at the same time, what we are also looking for and what we also achieved last year already is having, at least in the beginning, the big anchor customers, and they are mostly governmental anchor customers, because in the beginning, if you don't have satellites in space and if you don't have full-born products because you're developing it, what you're basically selling is trust and your vision that you are capable of doing something. And here it's very hard to find commercial companies that want to do this, and for governmental entities that have also a strategic concept and idea and motivation. It's better. So that's why the governmental entities are very good for initial anchor customer contracts that we are working on. And last year we closed a 3 million euro anchor contract with ESA for the Copernicus contributing mission, where we will be an emerging data supplier. And this, of course, those commercialization programs, they help a lot to get us rolling, but also to give trust to venture capital, for instance,
Yep.
that we also need in order to scale up our constellation. So for us, it's a mix. We need a good mix of public money and of private money, because we want to scale up in a public-private partnership scheme in order to get our constellation done. And here it's both. So you need the push from the market and also the signals from the market, and also in order for VCs to see, okay, there is some traction, because sometimes it's hard to explain, but
Yep.
the traction is immense. Really, we've been talking to hundreds of potential customers, and they're all so interested in the data and everything here. So for me, it's crystal clear, but for investors, it's not always crystal clear, because it's a rather complex material, I would say. But in the end, if we would have satellites in space right now, 20 satellites in space right now, there would be a huge pipeline of customers that would just buy the data and analytics, governmental, but also commercial ones. And now it's only about being quick and also deliver good quality. And that's what we want to do.
But here you make a very, very important point, which is often, I think, not mentioned by people, because, as I even said before, I focused on regulation, and many people focus on regulation, and oh yes, how bad regulation can get at times. But the other side of the coin to me is also what you said. Like, some governments and some public funding opportunities are there to really be the first supporters of an idea, of companies, or of startups. And they often give you that breathing air, that that initial funding, that initial support, to build trust, to then be able to approach companies, venture capitals, and so on, to then grow your company. So they do a very, very good job on pushing you from 0 to 1, so to say. So that's
Yes.
a very important point, not to forget that. I think that in Europe is done very well, because it's very
Yeah.
easy to start a company and to get initial funding to sort of validate your idea, as you did with the Business Incubation Center of ESA.
That's correct, and at the same time, it can also be very, very complex. I mean, it's always a mix again, and I see also this shift also in Germany to try to make it easier for startups to get there. But at the same time, if you're applying for some kind ESA proposal and working on a tender, everyone who has done this knows how extensive this can be, how many documents you have to fill out, how large everything is. So there's still this part also, I would say, the older space way of doing it, where you have to comply with so many things that some people just say, okay, it's not worth doing this because it just takes forever. And then you have those new initiatives where there's clearly this view of making it easier for companies. And this is something where, of course, it would be great to have even more of those initiatives in order to accelerate everything. That would be amazing, because there are big budgets out there, and it should not be super complicated to actually get those budgets if you have great ideas. And I mean, in the end, it's taxpayers' money, so it's okay that you have to comply with some regulations, but only some. That's the big point. In the end, you want to foster the ecosystem and not disturb the growing of it. And that's why, yeah, it's very cool to see those new initiatives, but at the same time, please more.
I fully agree. I fully agree. I'll repeat it as many times as I can. But now, moving on, like, why do you think Earth observation is so relevant in Europe now? Is it because of the war in Ukraine, or?
Also, so you clearly have the security and defense aspect. That is something that's just on the table. I mean, like I said earlier, you see it in different nations. You see it Europe-wide, that there are programs where there's just a lot of money being invested into sovereign infrastructure and defense and security. And this also means space, because space is a domain that has grown into like a really, really important also domain that will also make sure that Europe will be kept safe in the future. And that's why there's a big pull when it comes to this. And also everyone saw how dependent we are from other countries, also from the United States. And then if you look at what's happening there in the United States right now, if you then add Greenland to the equation, then you think, okay, this is all getting into directions that are not very comforting, I would say. And that's why if you can have European sovereignty and strength also in space, that's what everyone needs right now. And also, one thing that is, I mean, this is right now on the table. Everyone is talking about defense, and it's very important because it's also very important right now. But something that people talked about a while ago, but not anymore, is climate change and everything that's related to this, and also mitigating the effects of climate change, also observing what's happening all around the world, and also protecting coastlines, for instance, and coastal areas, flooded areas, also the effects on our forests, on agriculture, on basically everything. And this is something where Earth observation data just plays a huge role and will be playing in the future like an even huger role. And this will come back again also. And it's for us, it's also a bit like in the end, our heart is also green, I would say. We started also with this big environmental focus, and then we shifted a bit more into defense and security because it's also very important right now. But at the same time, we can also leverage this right now to use the big potential contracts that we will have, and also the big funding that comes in this direction, to bring the infrastructure into space. And then we can use it for all kinds of analytics and use cases. And this is basically, you can use it, just like I said, for everything. You don't have to focus on anything anymore, but it's a good accelerator for building the infrastructure now. And also there's new pool for VC money coming in right now. So that's why I think it's the best time and place right now to work on this. But the other topics, they will also come. And here we need a strong Europe that's not dependent on anyone.
Indeed, because the risk is what you said. The risk of not doing is, of not building sovereign technologies, that you're dependent on other countries that might have different interests, given the fact that this technology is, or this information is can get very political, right? It's not something that it doesn't matter what the differences in geopolitical views are, but of course it's important to be independent on this front. And I agree that the thing that you don't see can't be measured and is not known. So the more things that you can monitor, view, review, analyze, the better. And then applications, of course, can usually come after one opens the way for the industry, right? So that's
true.
That's
I mean, there are probably applications that no one even knows of until you actually have the data to work with it. So it's going to be very exciting also in the future.
Exactly. Now, before we finish, I think it's worth reviewing what Marble Imaging has accomplished so far, because if I'm not wrong, you started the company in 2023, August 2023. Mm-hmm. So it's been 2 years and a half, and you've raised decent money. You're soon to launch a satellite into space. But yeah, can you go through very quickly to
sure.
about your?
Of course. Yeah, I mean, raising money is actually something that is pretty important in order to grow as a company. So that, of course, was one of our big challenges, especially if you look at the European VC market. So we are really happy that we have very good investors on board now. And in total, we raised 17 million euros in dilutive and non-dilutive funding until now, which is already great. So this is for the development of the first satellite, but then also during the seed round that we just closed end of last year, where we had 5.3 million euros that we gathered in there. And here the High-Tech Gründerfonds is leading the whole VC consortium, which is great, and also gives us this stamp of approval because it's a very good VC, and all the other VCs that we also have on board, we're really happy to have them there and that they trust us. And I think we could give them a bit of the energy that we always have all the time, and they just wanted to be part of it. And yeah, exactly. So that's what we did. We're also raising more. So up to 30 million, we actually want to raise until or in Q2 this year, because we want to scale up our constellation. And that also means, like I said, public-private money in the end. But here we're also looking for another pull in order to be quicker here. what we did already, what we're also particularly proud of, is that we closed our first anchor contract, like I said, the 3
Yep.
million euro contract last year, which also is very important to show that there's um, commercial interest, and also that our business case is validated by the first big anchor customer. We have a huge pipeline of many customers that we want to monitorize on once the satellite is in space, or the satellites are in space and our analytics are done. We are already doing proof of concepts and gaining revenue here, which is really cool. And we have our own AI-based analytics already in place that we are further developing here. And here's also analytics like object detection on Earth observation data, change detection, for instance, also maritime security and coastal security. And those are really things where our team did a great job in order to develop all of this. And here we're really making big steps. And I'm really looking forward that we now have achieved so much and that everything's on track. And when it all comes together, it will be it will have an amazing effect, actually. And we are working towards this and already gaining traction, which I like a lot. It's intense, that's for sure, and you have so many different things to deal with. We are now around 20 people in the company. We will grow more and more, but still, for me personally, it feels like I'm wearing 3 or 4 hats and always doing this, and this. And but I'm really proud of our team and how everyone works together. And otherwise, we wouldn't be able to get so far so quickly.
And was it or has it been harder than you thought? All the
Yeah,
getting the first customers, raising so much money to be such as like such a early stage company on that sense, like only not even 3 year old company.
no, it was super easy. No, I'm kidding. No, no, it was really it still is really hard. But I mean it's what you choose in the end. If you are building a company like this, you start from scratch. No one has ever done this the way we want to do it in Germany right now. So you work a lot. It's very intense, and everyone is super motivated. That's why we're pushing us. But at the same time, we also want to find the right mix, that people are not burned out or anything, because that's also the downside, right? If you're working so much, it's also very challenging for everyone. And of course, if you have those ups and you win the contract here and you get into this accelerator there and everything is good, then it's all good, right? But then there are also those moments where you think, "Oh, this is tough right now, and we need a something that's good again, because otherwise it's really stressing you out." And yeah, that's something where we all have to take care of each other a bit, and that's what we're really trying to do here, to also have this good working atmosphere. But at the same time, everyone here is motivated and burns for marble. And that is not PR talk I'm doing right now. That's also why I am still energetic and doing this stuff, because you get this energy from all the other people, and everyone feels special, and they should feel, and that we're building something that's special here together. And that's why, yeah, intense but great.
And what do you look for when hiring someone? Is it like, do you look for skills? Like you have to have specific skills, you have to be an expert in Earth observation, or attitude, or both? Or, how do you define what's good versus bad talent?
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it's a mix, and of course, as we have many different positions and also segments in our company, it really depends. But of course, you need certain expertise in the for the certain topic you're working on. That's very important for us. And then, of course, you need to burn for the vision and to just achieve something new and cool. And if you can see this and have an easygoing person, then that's amazing. And of course, and one thing that is also something I want to mention here, we encourage also female employees to apply, because and that's also something in all the engineering jobs. You have this shift, and at least that's something that we also feel inside of Marble. It's great to have this combination of everything. So
Mhm.
yeah, basically everyone who has a good certain skill set, who is motivated, and who likes the idea of what we're doing, we encourage everyone to apply, and we will be growing. That's why we will have many different positions open.
And speaking about combination, the founding team has a very good skill set combination, as you mentioned earlier in the interview. But there's engineering, science, journalism. Like from the outside, what would you say you do as a journalist on the company? Because by training you're a journalist, and now you're leading a space company. What's your responsibility, and how? And is that something? Is there something you learned in your journalism career that now you're using as a skill?
Yes, so in the end, of course, I learned not quite a lot. I learned so much by joining this company, which I didn't know before. But maybe that's also one of the skills that I actually acquired in my former job, to dive into also scientifically complex topics and to kind of take them in and to make some sense out of it for others rather quickly. I will never be as well read and educated as the scientists here in the team are, but to a certain degree, I can rather quickly understand and then also make it understandable for other people, for our end customers in the end. And that's a skill set, because this is what I'm also doing. So business development, but also marketing. And then in the end, it also means to break down the very, very abstract or complex topics that the aerospace industry and satellite engineering has, for instance, into something that is digestible and that we can then even further use for a real product and not a scientific paper. And this is something that I did quite a lot in my journalism career also, when it came to animated infographics, for instance. So you have a text, you have lots of information, then you have to bring it into something that is visually appealing, that is not as complex, that is basically taking all the information, making it digestible for the ordinary people to understand. And that's, I would say, something that I can bring in here, of course, when it comes to operational stuff, like how to work with open source intelligence in combination with Earth observation images, and how you can then produce maps and analytics when it comes to this for our defense and security users. That's also something where I have a good, I would say, knowledge base on how to work with this data and how to make it workable in our context here. When it comes to AIS data, for instance, I also had the context to bring them in order to fuse it into our product. So it's that's basically it. But I'm learning. I'm learning every day, I would say, new
I
stuff.
can imagine. I can imagine. No doubt about that. Now, before we close, how does the next 12 months look for Marble Imaging?
Yeah, it's going to be intense as ever, I would say. So the next 12 months mean for us that we want to get everything in place for our satellite to launch. So that's our priority. This means that we have all the legal regulations in place. This means that we have all the security clearances. That means that the hardware is in place and that we can put our satellite in space. That's one thing. Also, that we really finalize the production of our data portal, where people can then access our data and other data and our analytics, and to further develop our analytics into products that are then widely spread into our customer pipeline. That's basically what we want to do. We want to grow as a team, of course. That's also important. We're actually moving into another office here in Bremen
Oh,
in a
wow.
couple of months, which is also nice because, yeah, it will be our own space. And here it's a very cool space, but it's also mixed with others. And so sometimes you have to fight for the conference rooms. And there we will have our own conference rooms. And also when it comes to security, it's way better if you have your own offices there, of course. And then, of course, the next big step will also be the next fundraising phase, the Series A that we're working towards. And yeah, this will be, I would say, the main points we will be dealing with, and yeah, will be intense like always.
Amazing. No, I can't wait. I can't wait to see how this year develops, because there's a lot to do for sure. Now, before we finish, two more questions.
Mhm.
The first one is, what would you recommend to someone looking or thinking about starting his own space company?
I would say be bold, just give it a try, and if you really want to change something, just go for it. Right now is the best time and the best place if you have a good idea to go through with it.
That's amazing. That's sometimes the best advice, right? Just go, just go with it and try
I
it,
mean,
because
sometimes
otherwise,
exactly. It's. I mean, there are so many points also that I figured out where you were like, "Ooh, this is stressful to a certain degree, or to a degree where you say, is it worth it?" And then you're pulling yourself together, and then the next day you're thinking, "Okay, actually, it wasn't that bad." And look, we did one step back, but we did three steps forward. So really stay in there. Don't get disappointed too quickly. And if you have a good idea, make use of all the programs that are out there. Maybe apply for the ESA business incubator. They're basically everywhere all over Europe, and it's a very good first start to get yourself sorted out and to get the business going. And then just yeah, the usual entrepreneurial vision by just go through with it and believe in your vision.
and yeah, fully agree. So thanks for that advice. And now the last one is, if your younger self were listening to this interview, what do you think? How would it feel to suddenly hear, Alexander Epp now today building Marble Imaging after, after all that you've learned over the past 5 years?
Yeah, we would have to specify how young my younger me would be, because probably I would
Pre-COVID, let's
pre-COVID.
say.
Okay, so then probably I would say, "Oh, you got old," but that's okay. No, I I actually don't know. I would probably say, yeah, not too bad. Just go with it, and let's talk again, future me in 5 years, because then it will be very interesting to see where everything goes. But hang in there, I would probably shout to shout
That's
to
amazing.
myself now. But no, it's fun, and that's why yeah. But the next 5 years will be super interesting. So actually, yeah, I would probably check in 5 years later and ask myself what's going on.
That's amazing. I'll do that. I'll do that instead of your
Yeah,
younger
please,
self. I'll be the one doing it.
you're very welcome to do so.
Okay, and now before we close, where can we learn more about Marble Imaging?
So on our website, marbleimaging.de, you can find out a lot about ourselves. Otherwise, follow us on LinkedIn. There you can also easily find Marble Imaging, because we are also traveling quite a lot. We are on many conferences. And if you see us anywhere, usually we're always promoting where we're going. And then feel always free to check in. And we love to exchange. And if you're interested in joining Team Marble, you're all also very welcome to send us your resume and everything.
Thanks a lot, Alexander. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Jamie. It was fun.